Before you conquer anything in the external world, you must first conquer the war happening inside your own skull. Machiavelli understood something that most men refuse to accept. The greatest enemy you will ever face is not a rival, not a competitor, not a system built against you. It is the undisciplined version of yourself that wakes up every morning and negotiates with weakness. The general does not negotiate, he commands. He looks at his mind the way a military strategist looks at a map, identifying weak points, eliminating dead weight, and fortifying what matters. Every thought you allow to linger without purpose is enemy territory. Every distraction you entertain is a breach in your defense. Every time you choose comfort over sharpness, you are handing your opponent a weapon to use against you. Focus is not a feeling. It is not something you wait to be inspired by. Focus is a decision made with the cold precision of a man who understands that time is the only resource that cannot be recovered once lost. Your mind is the battlefield, and right now, most men are losing on it without even realizing the war has already begun. Number 2, the general does not react, he calculates. Weak men react. They see provocation and they respond immediately, emotionally, without thought, like a chess piece being moved by someone else's hand. This is exactly what your enemies want. This is exactly what the world is designed to trigger in you. Every notification, every insult, every setback, every moment of chaos around you is a test, and most men fail it before they even realize they are being tested. The general operates differently. When pressure arrives, he does not flinch. He observes, he measures, he calculates the weight of every possible response before he moves a single muscle. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does not leave things to chance when he can apply reason. And that principle is not just political strategy, it is a way of being. It is a psychological architecture that separates the powerful from the powerless. Understand this, your emotional reaction is not strength, it is exposure. The moment you react without calculation, you have revealed your weak points to every sharp mind watching you, and there are always sharp minds watching. The boardroom, the street, the relationship, the negotiation, every arena of life rewards the man who can absorb pressure like stone and release response like a surgeon's cut, precise, deliberate, devastating. This is what dangerous focus looks like in practice. It means you build a wall between stimulus and response, and inside that wall, you think, you assess the terrain, you ask yourself what outcome you are engineering, not what emotion you are feeling. Feelings are data, not commands. The general reads them, processes them, and then sets them aside to do what must be done. React, and you become predictable. Calculate, and you become untouchable. Number 3. Eliminate everything that does not serve the mission. Machiavelli was not a man of sentiment, he was a man of strategy, and one of the most ruthless strategic truths he ever revealed was this: a prince who tries to please everyone will ultimately be destroyed by everyone. You cannot build an empire while carrying dead weight. You cannot become a general while surrounding yourself with soldiers who have already surrendered in their minds. At some point, the most powerful decision you will ever make is not about what you add to your life, it is about what you are willing to cut from it. Most men are afraid of that cut. They hold on to friendships that drain them because they fear loneliness. They maintain habits that sabotage them because change feels like loss. They stay in environments that shrink them because familiarity feels like safety. But here is the cold truth that Machiavelli understood centuries ago and that modern psychology confirms today. Your environment is not just influencing you, it is programming you. Every person you spend time with, every conversation you engage in, every space you occupy is either sharpening your edge or dulling it. There is no neutral ground. The general conducts an audit. He looks at his inner circle with the same ruthless objectivity he applies to enemy intelligence. He asks, does this relationship elevate my mission or dilute it? Does this habit build my capacity or erode it? Does this environment produce the version of me I am engineering, or does it keep pulling me back toward a version I am trying to destroy? These are not cruel questions.
they are necessary ones. Sentimentality is a luxury that losers afford themselves. The man who refuses to lose cannot carry passengers. This does not mean you become cold to the world. It means you become disciplined about what and who earns access to your time, your energy, and your mental space. Because your focus is finite, your hours are finite, and every minute spent on what does not serve the mission is a minute stolen from the man you are becoming. Cut ruthlessly, build deliberately. Protect your focus like it is the most valuable asset you own, because it is. Number 4, silence is your most dangerous weapon. There is a reason the most powerful men in history were never the loudest ones in the room. Power does not announce itself. Power does not explain itself. Power does not justify itself to those who are not qualified to understand it. And yet most men spend the majority of their energy doing exactly that, explaining their moves, defending their decisions, broadcasting their plans, seeking validation from mouths that will never feed them and minds that will never match them. This is not communication. This is self-sabotage dressed in the language of confidence. Machiavelli understood the geometry of silence better than almost any thinker who has ever lived. He watched princes fall, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they could not control what came out of their mouths. He observed courts, kingdoms, and power structures collapse because men revealed too much, too soon, to too many. Information is currency, and the man who spends his currency carelessly will always end up bankrupt, regardless of how much he started with. Every word you speak unnecessarily is a withdrawal from your power account. Every plan you announce before it is executed is a strategy handed to your opposition. Every emotion you display publicly is a map of your vulnerabilities given freely to those who would exploit them. Dark psychology teaches us something deeply uncomfortable about human nature. People do not respond to your openness with trust. They respond to it with calculation. The moment you reveal your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your next move, you have handed the psychologically sophisticated person in the room a set of levers they will use to pull you in whatever direction serves them. This is not cynicism. This is the observable mechanics of how human beings actually operate beneath the social performance of warmth and connection. The general speaks with intention, or he does not speak at all. He understands that silence in a conversation is not emptiness, it is pressure. It forces the other person to fill the void, to reveal themselves, to expose their hand while he keeps his chest close. Silence is intelligence gathering. Silence is dominance without aggression. Silence is the kind of control that cannot be argued with, cannot be manipulated, and cannot be disarmed because there is nothing visible to target.
Train yourself to become comfortable in silence the way a predator is comfortable in stillness. The lion does not roar before the hunt. He moves without announcement, strikes without warning, and lets the outcome speak with a volume that no words could ever match. Stop explaining your vision to people who are not on the battlefield with you. Stop defending your standards to those whose own standards are the reason they are watching your life instead of building their own. Speak less, observe more, and let your results be the only statement that matters. Number 5. The man who controls his hunger controls his destiny. There is a particular kind of destruction that does not come from your enemies. It does not come from the market, the competition, or the circumstances stacked against you. It comes from within. It comes from appetite without discipline, from desire without direction, from the raw, unregulated hunger that lives inside every man, and when left unchecked, becomes the very force that dismantles everything he has built. Machiavelli warned of this with surgical precision.
He observed that men are conquered most completely not by outside forces, but by their own passions. And history has proven him correct with a consistency that should terrify every man who is paying attention. Look at the men who had everything and lost it, the leaders who built empires and then watched them collapse, the executives, the athletes, the visionaries who reached the summit and then self-destructed in plain sight. In almost every case, the weapon that brought them down was not wielded by an enemy, it was wielded by themselves. Unchecked desire for pleasure, unmanaged addiction to validation, uncontrolled appetite for more, faster, louder, larger, without the internal architecture to sustain it. Hunger without discipline is not ambition. It is a slow, sophisticated form of self-destruction that wears the mask of drive. The general understands that desire is not the enemy. Desire is fuel, but fuel without a controlled burn mechanism does not power an engine. It causes an explosion. The most dangerous and effective men who have ever walked this earth were not men without desire. They were men who had learned to place their desire in chains, to direct it, throttle it, and release it only in the precise direction of their mission. They did not eliminate hunger, they weaponized it. They transformed raw appetite into focused, sustained, strategic energy that compounded over time into results that looked supernatural to everyone watching from the outside. This is what dark psychology reveals about high performers that most self-improvement content will never tell you. The ability to delay gratification is not just a productivity hack, it is a power dynamic. When you can sit across from temptation and choose your mission instead, you are developing a form of psychological dominance that extends far beyond the moment of resistance. You are training your nervous system to obey your intentions rather than your impulses. You are establishing internal hierarchy where the strategic mind governs the emotional body rather than the other way around. And once that hierarchy is established and reinforced through repetition, you become a fundamentally different kind of man, a man whose actions are always in service of his architecture, a man who cannot be easily baited, manipulated, or derailed because his hunger answers to him, not to the world around him. Stoicism speaks to this with equal force. Marcus Aurelius did not sit on the throne of the most powerful empire in the world and lose himself to its pleasures. And that was not accidental. It was the result of daily, deliberate, unrelenting internal governance. He wrote in his private journals, not for an audience, but as an act of self-command, reminding himself day after day that the quality of his life was determined not by what happened to him, but by what he chose to want. That wisdom is not ancient history. That wisdom is the operating system of every man who has ever achieved something that outlasted his circumstances. Control your hunger, and you control your timeline. Control your timeline, and you control your outcomes. Control your outcomes, and you become the kind of man that the world has no choice but to reckon with. Now stop and drop in the comments, "My hunger obeys me." Say it and mean it, because the man who can write that and believe it is already operating on a frequency that most men will never reach. Number 6, build in the dark, the strategy of invisible progress. There's a moment in every serious man's journey where he must make a choice that the majority of the world will never understand. The choice to disappear, not physically, not permanently, but strategically. The choice to go quiet on the timelines, to stop performing progress for an audience, to close the curtain on the work and let the silence around him grow loud while he grows powerful in the space that silence creates. Most men cannot make this choice. They are too addicted to the feedback loop, too dependent on the dopamine of visibility, too psychologically fragile to exist without the constant confirmation that other people are watching, approving, and acknowledging their movement. And that addiction, That need to be seen while becoming is one of the most effective limiters on human potential that has ever existed. Machiavelli understood the strategic value of concealment at a level that most modern thinkers have entirely forgotten. He studied the rulers who lasted and the rulers who fell. And one of the patterns he identified with devastating clarity was this: the prince who moved visibly was always easier to stop than the prince who moved invisibly. When your enemies can see your trajectory, they can calculate your destination. When they can calculate your destination, they can position themselves to block it. But when you operate beneath the surface, when your preparation is private, your strategy is sealed, and your ambition is known only to yourself, you remove from your opposition the most critical asset they need to neutralize you, which is information. You become a variable they cannot account for, and a variable that cannot be accounted for cannot be controlled. Dark psychology adds another dimension to this truth that cuts even deeper. The moment you begin publicly performing your self-improvement, broadcasting your gym sessions, announcing your goals, narrating your transformation for an audience, you trigger a psychological phenomenon where the social recognition you receive begins to substitute for the actual achievement. Your brain, which cannot fully distinguish between the reward of accomplishment and the reward of acknowledgement, begins to feel satisfied before the work is complete. The result is a man who talks like a winner, but moves like someone who has already collected the prize, slow, unfocused, and increasingly reliant on external validation to maintain his internal momentum. You have seen this man. You may have been this man. The cure is radical and simple. Stop announcing and start executing. The generals of history who achieved the most decisive victories were the ones whose opponents never saw them coming. Hannibal did not telegraph his crossing of the Alps. Caesar did not broadcast his strategy before his campaigns. The element of surprise was not just a military advantage, it was a psychological weapon that shattered the morale of opposition before a single sword was raised. That same principle applies to your life with identical force. When you resurface after a period of invisible work, sharper, stronger, more capable, more resourced than anyone around you expected, the psychological impact on those who doubted you, competed with you, or dismissed you is total and irreversible. You do not have to say a word. Your transformation says everything, and it says it in a language that cannot be argued with, minimized, or undermined.
This is the discipline of building in the dark. It requires a specific kind of internal strength, the ability to find your motivation entirely within yourself without the fuel of external eyes. It requires you to become your own audience, your own validation, your own source of confirmation that the work is worth doing. That is not isolation, that is sovereignty. The man who needs no witness to do the work is the man who will eventually produce work that the whole world cannot ignore. Go dark on the noise. Go deep on the mission. Let the world wonder what happened to you, and then show them exactly what happened to you through results so undeniable that silence was always the loudest strategy you could have chosen. Protect your process, guard your vision, and build with the kind of focused, unwitnessed intensity that turns ordinary men into forces of nature. Drop in the comments right now, "I build in silence," because the men who understand that statement are the men already operating on a different level than everyone around them. Number 7, the psychology of the unbreakable man. There is a category of man that the world does not fully understand and cannot easily explain. He has been broken before, sometimes completely, sometimes repeatedly, and yet he stands, not because he was untouched by pain, not because life handled him gently or fortune smiled on him consistently,
but because somewhere in the architecture of his character, he developed something that most men never cultivate and that no external circumstance can provide, an unbreakable relationship with his own will. This is not the man who never falls. This is the man who has fallen so many times that the ground no longer frightens him, and that distinction is everything. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river. When it floods, it destroys everything in its path, but the wise man builds embankments before the flood arrives. He does not wait for adversity to begin constructing his resistance. He builds his psychological infrastructure during the calm, so that when the storm arrives, and it always arrives, he is not scrambling for survival. He is executing from a position of prepared strength. This is not optimism. This is engineering. The unbreakable man does not hope that hardship will not find him. He assumes it will. He prepares for it methodically, and when it arrives, it meets not a man who is surprised, but a man who has been waiting. Dark psychology reveals something about resilience that the motivational industry spends billions of dollars carefully avoiding. Real psychological strength is not built in comfort. It is built in controlled exposure to difficulty. The men who become genuinely unbreakable are the men who have deliberately chosen the harder path when the easier one was available, who have voluntarily placed themselves under pressure, in discomfort, in situations where failure was possible and survival was not guaranteed. Every time you choose difficulty when ease was an option, you are making a deposit into a psychological account that pays compound interest in the form of unshakable confidence. Not the performative confidence of a man who has never been tested, but the quiet, immovable confidence of a man who has been tested repeatedly and is still standing. Stoicism speaks to this with a force that cuts through every modern distraction. Epictetus, a man who began his life as a slave, who had every reason to be destroyed by his circumstances, built a philosophy of power from the inside out. His core teaching was radical in its simplicity. There are things within your control and things outside of it, and the entirety of your suffering comes from confusing the two.
The unbreakable man has made peace with this distinction at a cellular level. He does not waste his psychological energy raging against what cannot be changed. He does not collapse under the weight of outcomes he cannot govern. He identifies with ruthless clarity what belongs to his will, his effort, his response, his standards, his direction, and he pours everything he has into that domain while releasing everything else with the cold, clean detachment of a man who understands where his power actually lives. This psychological architecture produces something in a man that his environment begins to feel before it can explain. People sense it when they are in his presence. There is a stillness about him that reads as danger to those who are accustomed to reactive, emotionally available, easily destabilized men. He does not rise to bait. He does not crumble under pressure. He does not require reassurance or external stabilization to maintain his equilibrium. He is, in the most precise sense of the word, self-contained. And self-containment at that level is one of the rarest and most commanding qualities a human being can possess, because it signals to every person in the room that this man's power does not depend on their cooperation, their approval, or their participation. But understand this: the unbreakable man is not numb. He is not emotionally dead. He is not the hollow, disconnected caricature that weak interpretations of Stoicism produce. He feels everything. He processes it with full honesty in private, and then he governs himself. He chooses his response with the deliberate precision of a man who knows that how he carries himself in the worst moments is the truest and most permanent statement he will ever make about who he is. Adversity does not build character, it reveals it. And the man who has done the internal work knows exactly what his character will reveal when the pressure arrives, because he has already met himself in the darkness and chosen not to flinch.
Every scar you carry is not evidence of your weakness, it is evidence of your survival. It is proof that every version of reality that tried to stop you has failed, and that proof, that record of endurance, is the foundation upon which the most dangerous kind of confidence is built. Not arrogance, not performance, but the deep, settled, immovable knowing of a man who has been through the fire and emerged not destroyed, but defined. You are not building toward unbreakable, you are uncovering it. It was always there beneath the noise, the doubt, the distraction, and the damage. The work is simply the process of removing everything that is not it. Drop in the comments right now, "The fire made me," because every man who has earned that statement knows exactly what it cost and exactly what it built. Number 8, your circle is your ceiling. There is a law operating in your life right now that most men are completely unconscious of, and its invisibility is precisely what makes it so devastating. It is not written in any contract. It is not announced by anyone around you. It operates silently, consistently, and without mercy in the background of every interaction, every conversation, and every environment you choose to place yourself inside. That law is this: you will never outgrow the collective standard of the people you surround yourself with. Not sustainably, not permanently. Because human beings are not isolated systems, we are permeable. We absorb the values, the language, the limitations, and the ambitions of those closest to us, the way lungs absorb air, automatically, continuously, and without conscious permission. Machiavelli advised the prince with absolute directness on this matter. Choose your advisors with more care than you choose your battles, because bad counsel has destroyed more kingdoms than bad enemies ever could.
He understood that the men around a leader do not merely influence his decisions, they shape the very framework through which he perceives what is possible, what is acceptable, and what is worth pursuing. A prince surrounded by small thinkers will eventually begin to think small, regardless of how large his original vision was. The environment colonizes the mind gradually, subtly, and thoroughly, until the man inside it can no longer distinguish between his own thinking and the thinking that has been absorbed from those around him. This is where dark psychology delivers one of its most uncomfortable revelations. The people closest to you, the ones who claim to love you, support you, and want the best for you, are often the most effective limiters on your growth, not out of malice necessarily, but out of something far more psychologically complex and far more difficult to defend against. When you begin to grow, when you begin to raise your standards, expand your vision, and operate at a level that exceeds the shared ceiling of your circle, you trigger in the people around you a psychological response that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own unconfronted limitations. Your progress becomes a mirror they did not ask to look into, and rather than face what that mirror shows them, many will consciously or unconsciously attempt to pull you back to the level where the reflection is comfortable again. They will call it concern. They will frame it as loyalty. They will dress it in the language of keeping you grounded, keeping you humble, keeping you realistic. But what they are actually doing is protecting the shared ceiling from being broken, because if you break it, they have no excuse left for why they have not. Recognize this pattern not with bitterness, but with clarity. You cannot afford the luxury of misdiagnosing the source of resistance in your life. When the people around you consistently minimize your ambitions, question your standards, and seem most comfortable when you are operating below your potential, that is not love. That is limitation wearing love's clothing. The general builds his inner circle the way he builds his army, with ruthless selectivity, non-negotiable standards, and zero tolerance for the kind of mediocrity that spreads like infection through proximity. He surrounds himself with men who are building, men who are hungry, men who challenge him upward rather than pulling him downward. He understands that 5 relationships of genuine elevation are worth more than 50 relationships of comfortable stagnation. Quality of counsel over quality of company. Always. Audit your circle with the cold eye of a strategist. Elevate deliberately. And remember, Your environment is not just where you live, it is what you are becoming. Number 9, the long game. Why patient men always win. In a world engineered for instant gratification, where every platform, every algorithm, every product, and every system is designed to deliver reward as fast as possible and keep your attention span as short as possible, the man who masters patience is not just disciplined. He is operating with a competitive advantage so profound, so rare, and so consistently underestimated that it borders on a superpower. Because here is what the architects of distraction do not want you to understand. Speed is not the same as progress. Movement is not the same as direction. And the man who moves fast in the wrong direction does not arrive sooner. He simply fails with more momentum. Machiavelli studied power across decades, across regimes, across the rise and fall of men who appeared invincible and then collapsed without warning. And the pattern he identified in those who lasted, who genuinely accumulated power that compounded rather than crumbled, was not brilliance alone. It was not aggression alone.
It was not even strategy alone. It was the marriage of strategy with patience, the willingness to plant in seasons where no harvest was visible, to move with deliberate slowness when the world demanded urgency, to hold a position under pressure when every instinct and every outside voice was screaming to react, to pivot, to abandon the plan and chase the moment. The prince who could not wait was always eventually outmaneuvered by the prince who could. Dark psychology illuminates why patience is so psychologically difficult for most men, and therefore why it is so strategically valuable for the few who develop it. Delayed gratification requires the prefrontal cortex to override the limbic system, the rational, long-term planning architecture of the brain, to dominate over the emotional reward-seeking machinery that evolution built for short-term survival. This is not a natural state, it is a cultivated one. And every time you practice it, every time you choose the long-term position over the short-term relief, you are literally rewiring the neurological infrastructure of your decision-making. You are building a brain that operates on a longer timeline than the people competing against you. And a man operating on a longer timeline than his competition is a man who will almost always win because he is playing a game that his opponents do not even realize is being played. Marcus Aurelius governed the most complex empire in the ancient world with a principle that he returned to again and again in his private writings, that almost nothing urgent is actually important, and almost nothing important is actually urgent. That distinction, simple as it sounds, is the operating system of every man who has ever built something that lasted. Urgency is manufactured by the world around you to keep you reactive. Importance is determined by your own strategic clarity. The man who cannot distinguish between the two will spend his entire life responding to noise, while the signal, his actual mission, his actual trajectory, his actual potential, goes unaddressed. The long game demands a specific kind of faith that has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with self-knowledge. It is the faith of a man who knows his own capacity deeply enough to trust the process, even when the results are not yet visible, even when the people around him have stopped believing, even when the timeline has stretched beyond what anyone else would tolerate. That faith is not passive. It is the most active, most disciplined, most demanding form of commitment that exists, because it asks you to keep building in the absence of confirmation, to keep investing in the absence of returns, and to keep moving in the absence of applause. The world will always reward the man who refused to quit before the compound effect became visible. Plant your work like a man who will not be here for the harvest, and watch what grows when lesser men have long since walked away.
Number 10. You are the weapon. Now become unstoppable. Everything you have heard in this monologue has been building toward one singular, irreversible conclusion.
that the most dangerous force on this earth is not a system, not a circumstance, not an enemy with resources and reach. It is a man who has decided fully, completely, without reservation and without the possibility of retreat. A man who has looked at every weakness inside himself, every limitation around him, every voice that told him to shrink, and chosen with the cold clarity of a general surveying his final battlefield to become something that the world has no framework to stop. Machiavelli did not write his principles for the masses. He wrote them for the rare man, the man willing to see reality without the comfort of illusion, to operate without the crutch of approval, and to build with the kind of focused, relentless, unwitnessed intensity that turns vision into legacy. That man is not born, he is forged. And the forging happens exactly where you are standing right now, in the decision, in the discipline, in the daily choice to become harder, sharper, and more intentional than you were yesterday. You are the weapon, the philosophy is the whetstone, and every day you apply these principles, you become an edge that the world cannot dull. Drop in the comments your final declaration. I am the general. I refuse to lose. Say it like you mean it, because the man who means it has already begun to become it. If this monologue reached something real inside you, like this video, subscribe to Machiavellian Mind, and turn on notifications because what is coming next will go even deeper. The war is not over. It has just begun.